welcome you all, to share the journey, to share the uncertainties, and to give you some clear signposts of where we're headed. But this is very much about working together, listening, understanding each other, making sure that we've not made assumptions about what somebody else thinks, the unconscious bias that we're all inclined to make. So if you're feeling confused today, get interested, because that's when you're about to discover and you're going to learn. And that's what this is all about, being able to realise that perhaps we don't know what we don't know and talking to other people. So let's share this journey today. And part of that is I'd really like to explore who we have in the room. So I'm not going to get you all to stand up, which I do sometimes, but could you put your hands up if you are already associated with BuildingSmart? And then take a look around the room. So those of you who are not familiar with BuildingSmart, please put your hands up. So not so many of us, but can everyone who knows BuildingSmart, keep your hands up, those of you who aren't. Okay, they need buddies. So can you look out for us, put your arms around us, show us the ropes. There's going to be a lot of jargon. So don't be scared to challenge the jargon. If you don't know what something means, particularly an acronym, ask. Actually, what I would appeal to you is forget that BIM's an acronym. Forget what it's supposed to mean, because kind of we'll waste a lot of time doing it. It's the principles of what BIM is doing for us today, making a difference for our industry, which is what we want to explore, to find out what the potential is and to really take the opportunities and maximise those moving forward. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Patrick MacLeamy, who's the chairman of BuildingSmart International. He's an architect. Soul, I think, is probably the right way to describe it, and passionately wants to make a difference to this industry, feeling that we need to change the way that this industry works. So Patrick will talk to us for about 20 minutes, I think. And again, if you have questions, any uncertainties, let's tease those out as we go along. So Patrick, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. It's an honor for an American architect to be at RIBA. I have no PowerPoint. This may be the only presentation you hear today where you don't have to look at the screen, just at me. That may be a difficulty, I don't know. I want to talk about my journey and then my journey joining what has eventually become BuildingSmart and why it's important, why it was important to me as a much younger person, and why it's important, absolutely vitally important, I think, for everybody in this room and outside, including those who are just being introduced to BuildingSmart. As I said, I'm an architect. I started in the practice after I'm going to say a very classical or traditional education in the U.S. I learned how to describe a building by plan, section, elevation, and details and specifications, the traditional route. Works pretty well for small buildings. And then I graduated and joined this firm in St. Louis, Missouri. For those who don't know, it's in the middle of the U.S., almost in the geographic center. And HOK didn't do little buildings. HOK was engaged in doing large, complex buildings. So I made my way forward and onward in HOK, eventually was transferred to the first branch office, my luckiest day, to San Francisco. So I became a Californian and have had the opportunity to participate in HOK's growth and work around the world, including a really fine office here in London. Along this path, I learned that the way I had learned about architecture was inadequate. all up and down. First, the description of a building by drawings, plan, section, elevation, detail, and specifications became very large and unwieldy for large, complicated buildings. Something had to be better than this. The second thing I learned was that the process of getting a building designed was only the beginning of the job. And then we had to deal with, to work with this entity called a general contractor to actually build the building. And I was taught from school, I'm sorry to say, that the contractor is the opponent of design, perhaps even the enemy of design. And the contractor's job is to build the building for the lowest possible cost, even if it meant cutting corners that impacted the quality of the design. So I grew up in this world thinking and believing that the architect, of course, was at the center of all things, and all the world swirled around that architect with the talent, and that the contractors were best dealt with at arm's length. That was all wrong, completely wrong. What I learned is we're part of a process. We're an important part. Contractor certainly plays an important part. And in fact, if there is a center to the process, it's the owner, the client or the customer of the architect and the contractor. And finally, the owner is the customer of the people who occupy and use the buildings for whatever purpose. So the ultimate customer or client of all of us are all of us, because we all use buildings. We all live in them, work in them, get educated in them, get healed in them, and so on. So in my almost 50 years of practice, it took me almost 20 years to fully understand what I just told you. So that was my personal journey, and I began to look for answers. This system is broken, and how can we fix it, make it right? In 1994, by the way, this is not a technical talk. This is plain English, and while I've been told, and I've often said, that the Brits and the Americans are two people separated by a common language, I certainly hope you can understand all my words. I'll do my best to keep it extremely simple. The main thing is to gain understanding. So this world I grew up in was actually wrong, and I began looking for answers, and in 1994, found myself allied with 11 other U.S. companies, all doing international work in a group that was actually founded by Autodesk. Autodesk was and is, in my opinion, a visionary in this area of helping us all. As a software company, they saw the limitations of what software could do and realized our industry had to evolve and change to better serve the ultimate customer, the people that use our buildings, which is every single person. So our 12 companies spent 1 year proving something that I didn't know existed until I joined this group, which is the concept of interoperability. Now, that's a technical term. I couldn't spell it at the beginning. I can now. And interoperability, in plain, simple terms, is like a universal translator. We're all speaking and using English today, I guess. And that's become, fortunately for me, a commonly used language for business and commerce around the world these days, fortunately. So it's become a common language. And interoperability is a bit like that. It's a universal translator, if you will, that allows one software to speak to another software, or in modern parlance, exchange data with another software. That sounds pretty esoteric, but it's pretty handy. We spent a year proving that work could be done using different softwares and exchanging information between the two softwares to gain advantage, to make something work better. At the end of that year of proof, we all became convinced that we had something that was worth sharing with the world. And in fact, did the opposite of what you might expect. We thought, well, this is really an advantage for us 12 companies. We could keep it private and seek advantage for ourselves, but thought, well, no, that probably will only work for a short time. What we really need to do is open this thing up to the world and allow the promise of interoperability to be shared by everyone in our industry. The other recognition we had was that the building industry, of which I'm a part, many of you in this room are, and later discovered the infrastructure industries in the same fix, is really international. We at my company are as likely to specify a Mitsubishi elevator as we are an Otis elevator, and so on. The world is getting smaller, and the world of design and construction, whether it's buildings or architecture, is getting quite small indeed. I was just informed by United Airlines that I've flown now my 2 millionth mile on United Airlines alone. I probably look like I've got a lot of miles on me. And it's because the world needs good design and good construction, good buildings at a fair price, at a constantly improving price and a constantly improving quality, and we are not yet delivering on that need. The rest of the world, banking, telecommunications, certainly product manufacturing, including devices like this, have changed the world. And we're barely out of the plan, section, elevation, detail, and specification. By the way, if you ever saw the array of plan, section, elevation, detail, and specifications, and shop drawings, and manufacturer's literature and information, all in paper for a large building, it fills a small room. Actually, for a large building, it fills a large room. And we expect a building engineer or a building supervisor or manager to dive through this pile of paper and make heads or tails of it and actually operate a building. It just doesn't work. So we formed this alliance. We opened it up to the public in 1995. I traveled around the world with several of my colleagues from this original group. And in 1996, here in London, at a place called the White House, that's not our White House, it's your White House, we actually founded what became known as the International Alliance for Interoperability. In those days, if you could spell interoperability, we made you an immediate member. IAI, and I'm fond of saying IAI is AIA, my organization turned inside out, because we need to, was founded on the principles of chapters in countries or language areas. We now, of course, have chapters around the world. Many of you that are from outside the UK are in other chapters. Those of you who have joined our church, and began the process of developing interoperability tools, in particular this thing called the IFC. I said this is not a technical talk. Industry foundation classes are these little universal translators that allow us to do useful work using more than one software. Why? Because the world needs us. It needs us to be more efficient. My term for IFC is actually International Friendship Club, because we all need to work together wherever we are to provide better service, better buildings, better infrastructure for the world that's so desperate for them. I have a few notes, and of course I've done it the technical way here. No one understood what IAI, or International Alliance for Interoperability, meant, so in 2008, we've rebranded ourselves BuildingSmart. BuildingSmart is, of course, a modern type term. It's all run together, words. building is all lowercase, even though it might begin a sentence, and smart is all uppercase because that's cool, but it actually means something. We want to be smart about the way we build. We want to be really smart about it. We thought about smart building, but that was confusing at the time and still is with intelligent building. We want to be smart about the way we design, build, and operate our buildings all the way through the life cycle. The world demands nothing less. In 2011, or thereabouts, we achieved something with mostly volunteers, all volunteers putting up some money and a lot of personal labor. Our IFC, Industry Foundation Classes, International Friendship Club, achieved ISO certification status. That's a big deal. That means that our standard became an internationally recognized standard, went through the ISO process, and was adopted. That gave software companies and users of software more confidence that these standards for exchange of information were here to stay and could be relied upon. In 2013, almost to the current day, I was called to the UK Government Briefing Center on Victoria Street, I believe, number 1 Victoria Street. I remember going down, must have been a World War II aircraft bunker or something, because it was completely underground. I got lost a couple of times, but met with UK government representatives who said, we're beginning a BIM initiative here in the UK. We're the biggest customer for buildings and infrastructure in the UK, and most governments, in fact, are in their own respective countries. UK, it's no different. And we have a government mandate to save an initial 20% of the cost of all of our new buildings and infrastructure, and then later 30%. And we want buildings to be better than ever, not just cheaper. And we want to build faster. And we don't want to save money on buildings. We want to do 5 schools instead of 4. 5 kilometers of roadway or rail instead of 4, and so on. Why am I here? Well, you're the chairman of BuildingSmart International. We cast about looking for an international standard for information exchange, because we don't just want a UK standard. That's not big enough. We want an international standard so the UK doesn't end up in a blind alley with no way out when another standard might be adopted. That's interesting when that door closes. I can't hear anything when it closes. Anyway, I'm glad whoever came in, I'm glad you're here. I'm almost to the end of what I want to say. This is the important bit. The UK representative said, we cast about for an open, meaning non-proprietary, open to all, international standard for information exchange that can be adopted in the UK with confidence that will be adopted worldwide, so that the marketplace that the UK occupies will become global. And the only one we found was the BuildingSmart standards that were certified by ISO. A good start. But you have to get your act together. You're not organized or professional enough to stand the stress and strain, there it is again, of standards development that we have in mind. So if you want to participate with us, please get yourself organized professionally so that you can grow with us as we go on our journey, the UK BIM initiative journey, which is, in my view, as an American, I have great envy here, because it is the most ambitious, audacious initiative in the world today. By comparison, the United States government and all of our agencies is asleep. Hopefully with this initiative, they'll finally wake up and do something about it in the U.S. And I could say that for most, not all, but most of the other countries in Europe and around the world. So we're now on a new journey at BuildingSmart with a professional staff. Richard Petrie, our new executive who's in the room here and who will speak later today, is our new chief executive. We've just hired a new assistant for Richard, another Richard, and we're on a journey to become fully professional. Yes, still with volunteers, but better funded, more professional, and more able to meet the challenge that was issued to me by the UK government. That's why I'm here today. I think for those who practice architecture or construction or something related in the UK, you know about this initiative. You're probably wondering how you will go about this. We're all in the same boat here. We all have to learn to work in a new way, but it's actually quite liberating. I think that architecture, for me, is really important, but I want to practice a new kind of architecture where I can be more thoughtful about design, not just about the fashion of the exterior look of the building, but how will buildings work, how green I can make my buildings, how sustainable, how I can design my buildings so that they actually live and work well in the location, and finally, at the end of a useful life, can be recycled appropriately so we don't add to the burden that we've already put on our environment. That's a hugely exciting promise for all of us if we just get together and do this. That's why I'm still involved in this after nearly 50 years of practice, and this is our 20th year of IAI, now BuildingSmart. So I ask all of you, of course this is the Church of the Converted, most of you are here because you already believe this, but this is now our time. This is our tipping point. We have a major client, the UK government, pushing us gently but firmly to evolve how we work. And with my newfound partners, not enemies or opponents, general contractors and suppliers and subcontractors and all the rest, we can make this world a much better world in the built environment. And the world needs us. So join with us. If you're already joined with us, become more active. If you happen to be in a position in a company as I am, a CEO or a position of some influence, join us also with some funding help. Become a member, an international member, or even a strategic advisory council member, which is what HOK has done. We need you, we need each other to complete our journey. Thank you.
So I rather loved the International Friendship Club, Patrick. I thought that was wonderful because I think we are talking about managing information and digital data, but part of why we want to do that is that it gives us the currency of trust, and we need speed of trust to be able to collaborate across our industry better. So within the UK, as Patrick says, there is this big push, this mandate, and I was been lucky enough for 2-3 years, I think. Rob Manning, you're here as well, aren't you? To be working on the UK BIM Taskgroup with the departments. So really important work. As you know, we have a mandate by 2016 to be delivering publicly funded projects using Level 2 BIM. And during the day, we will explore more what Level 2 BIM is and what the future holds as we move to Level 3. But as a director and fellow at Atkins of BIM Strategy and Implementation, what I found was a tension was I was becoming almost holier than thou for what the UK wanted. And other people were saying, yeah, but what's the relevance in Europe or in the States or in Asia Pacific? So what I'd like to explore now, within the room, how many of you are in the UK? So a fair number. Okay. How many are in Europe but not in the UK, if I can say it that way? Okay. And how comfortable are you about the UK programme? well, let's phrase it this way. Would you like to challenge some of the assumptions of the UK programme? Those of you in Europe? A few of you. Okay, and we need to be receptive to that. What about people in the States? From the States? Patrick, we've got. And again, of you, would you like to challenge some of what you see from the UK programme? Sure. And I think we should hear your voice. And what about Asia-Pac, Asia-Pacific? Got anyone from Asia-Pacific? And again, how comfortable are you with the UK programme? Would you like to challenge some of what happens in the UK? You're not sure? Yeah, probably. Okay, and have I missed anybody else? Anyone else? No, I think I have. I didn't cover all of the globe, but I seem to have done. So I think this is what's really important and what BuildingSmart International should be doing. And certainly there's more collaboration also. I'm very much in infrastructure and geospatial, and that convergence with, for instance, the Open Geospatial Consortium, making sure that the solutions we come up with are robust and land with the problem statement in front of us. So I hope as we move forward, we'll clearly state for you today what that problem statement is and how we need to approach it, and how we really need to make sure that we open up the debate and make sure we get a rigorous solution. So I'm going to ask now for our next speaker, who's the Managing Director of Solibri, to come and talk to us about managing the quality of data in Level 2 BIM. So David, with that, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Do we have a clicker for the...
So it should be over there.
Good. What an introduction. Well, good morning. I'll say two things. First of all, it's the first time that Dave Philp's followed me onto the stage. It's normally the other way around. So I'm not going to miss this opportunity, that's for sure. And the second thing is, I'm not here to talk about Level 2 in detail. That's his job, and that's other people's jobs, because I don't do technical talks. Now, we've got a room here full of people, many of whom are associated with BuildingSmart, and technically, you guys know a lot more than I will ever know. But for those of you who've seen me speak before, you know I take things back to basics, because to me, it's all about very clear communication. Let me give you an example of what I mean of this. If we had a situation where somebody wanted to use, let's say, dilute sulfuric acid to clear out drains, and ask the opinion of an expert, an engineer would probably come back and say that the efficacy of sulfuric acid is incompatible with metallic permanence. I'd say, don't use sulfuric acid, it eats the shit out of metal. Which message is the one that normally gets across? We've got to be able to communicate clearly. So what am I here to talk about today? That's a good point. Hang on, this doesn't seem to be working. That's good. Can we have some help here, please? It could be.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
Maybe you walk across.
Wow, how about that? That's good. Well, I'm glad the picture came up. So this is fairly simple. This is pictured. Would you drive one of these? Hang on. Don't answer the question yet, because something should have happened there, and it didn't. You don't know when I want to be clicked. Hang on. Let's do it this way. See if this works. Second part of the question. Had it been designed by the construction industry? Does it make sense now? No, it still doesn't work. Probably not. This is a talk about quality, by the way. I think that's officially known as a reboot, isn't it? Honestly, I didn't touch any buttons, as you noticed, so you can't blame me for that one. Okay. Probably not. Now, let's see if this works. No. That doesn't work either. Right. We would tend to lack some confidence in the process that built it. Does that make sense? Well, I'd like to be able to do that again, because that flow's really slick, and not on this occasion. Nothing's happening. So what do I do? Do I wave at somebody and they go, yes, okay. So this may or may not work then. But why? Yes? Do you ever get the feeling it's one of those days? Well, my word, where did that luck come from? So why wouldn't we do it? These are just some of the things. You know, as an industry, we're not very good at communicating. My background is manufacturing. I came into this industry in 2005, and after 25 years of working with integrated process in manufacturing, I was asked to give a short talk at the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors in 2005. Basically, what are the main differences between the construction process after 6 months, if you found out, and the manufacturing process? And I said, it's quite simple. Construction, trust nobody, keep everything to yourself. Until that changes, I can't help you. Now, BIM is changing that. The government's initiatives are changing that. But we've still got this situation. And this is why we don't really have the confidence to drive a sports car that would be designed by the construction industry, because we know it is flawed. Please. Maybe if I clap my hands, does that work? No. Let's try this button again. Oh, God. Hey, you've got to follow this, you know. If I'm having these troubles, imagine what you're going to have, because you've got slides like this. Oh, hang on, it's moving again, Dave. Basically, if we can't trust other project partners, if we're unwilling to share data with them, yes, please? Ha! This is going to be a long presentation, I'm warning you. The result is incomplete or incorrect information, which in turn compromises quality. We're getting there. Thank you. And destroys confidence. Now, that should have all gone. Click, 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 click. Never mind. So we've got to establish a process of trust, first and foremost. So why do we put up with it? Why do we put up with this situation? Well, I think it's quite simple, if somebody will push the button. There we are. There's usually somebody that we can blame in the process. And am I being cynical? Are we in a culture here in construction whereby we look to pass blame onto someone else? This could be good. We look to try and find a scapegoat. We look to make the system not as efficient as it should be. Am I being cynical, or does anybody see this in construction? I'm sure we do. You know, we've got to be honest with ourselves. So, just look at the words in red. We've got to have confidence in the process. We need to have a process that we can trust. That's collaboration. And in that environment, it gives us a fighting chance to create what is important, which is quality information. Is that what really BIM is? Next. Next. Thank you. Then, of course, there's this other thing that we need, this thing called communication. Next. Effective communication. Next. Oh, God. You know, there was a guy called Dr. Joseph Bracich. He's a psychologist. He was an Australian. He's no longer with us. He was an expert on communication. And he stepped back and looked at a problem from a very simple perspective. Next. And he said, there are 3 ways that we can communicate. The first one is we can inform. So I'm going to use an example here. The top right-hand picture is a father and his little boy who are walking down the street, and the bottom picture shows a wall. On the top of the wall, there is broken glass. Now, as a father myself, I know that I want to pass on my expertise and knowledge, a bit like the construction industry. So I don't want my son to climb that wall because I know he'll hurt himself. There's 3 ways I can communicate that to him. I can say, don't climb that wall. And you know, if I do that, next, there's a 10% chance of success. In other words, there's a 90% chance that when I turn my back, he will climb the wall. So that's informative communication. Next. The second one is that we can communicate and explain. So in this case, I could say to him, don't climb that wall because there's broken glass on the top. It will hurt you. That will work. Thank you. You know, you said this will work. Next. Now, there's a little bit more data there, isn't there? We're putting some information behind the information. And now, believe it or not, there is a 50% chance that the message will get across because we've given a reason. But there's still a 50% chance that the little boy will try and climb the wall. Next. Doesn't work, sorry. I'm pushing the buttons, nothing's happening. And the third level of communication is engagement. And this is the most effective way of working because if it were me and that were my son, my approach would be, you see that wall there? On the top of the wall there is broken glass. Now, you tell me, what do you think will happen if you climb that wall? And obviously, we're now engaging, we're now communicating, we're now sharing data, we're now introducing more data. But in this case, now, next. Oh, okay, we just got a built-in time delay then. Now, never mind, that's fine. Now we've got a 90% chance that he will succeed. So the simple message that we're trying to do. This is a nightmare, isn't it? Absolute nightmare. But, that's it. Next. Engagement means, next, even more data. So the example there is, the more data that we use, the more chance we've got to get the right result. But if we've got more data, this requires, next, open communication. Patrick touched on it. And if we have open communication, we need a protocol. Now, I'm going to go through a little exercise here, which I call the flag trick. Some of you may have seen it. But when people ask me what is open protocol and the importance of open protocol, I find that this little message works quite well. So let's see. Next. There's three ways that we can, first of all, exchange. We've seen that. But there's three ways we can achieve a common protocol. Next. And they are called bespoke. Next. Single platform, or in our case, closed BIM. Common platform, or in our case, open BIM. That's about as technical as my presentation gets, because now I want to move away from construction to, next, the United Nations. The United Nations, as you may know, is 192 sovereign countries who between them speak around about 50 different languages. Now, I don't know what it is that they do, but in order to do it, I think you would all agree with me that those 50 different languages and those 192 sovereign nations need to be able to communicate. Because if they can't communicate, they can't do whatever it is that they do. Next. So I'm not going to do 192. I'm just going to take 4 countries here. So we've got China, Spain, France, Germany. For no other reason than they are 4 different languages. So let's assume that we've now got to work as the United Nations and we've got to communicate. How do we do it? There's 3 protocols we can adopt. Next. The first one, next, is that everybody learns everybody else's language. That would work, wouldn't it? So if we all spoke those 4 languages, then we could all communicate and exchange data. Anybody speak 4 languages? Yeah? Yeah. I've had somebody actually put their hand up and said they could speak 7, which was very impressive. They couldn't speak 50, which is what we would need to do at the UN. But for most people, that is not a possibility. We could not learn that many languages. But in technical terms, what we're saying is if we have 4 different technologies, then we could, theoretically, develop a bespoke communication link between those 4 technologies. It may be a problem every time there's a new version of the technology because now we'd have to redo the link. But it is a possible solution, so it's right that we show it. Next. That's called a bespoke system. Next. There's another way of working. This actually is quite a bit scary. I'm looking at it now, and it's... yeah. Next. Everybody, except one, has to change the language. So now we all speak Chinese. That would work, wouldn't it? Because we could all communicate. And that's called a single platform. Because now everybody's speaking the same language. And from a technology perspective, what that means is that you don't bother looking at the multiple technologies out there, some of which are better suited to your application than others. You just use one supplier. Now, as a vendor, and I know other vendors would say, that would be fantastic. Forget everybody else, just buy our products. But that's not real. That's not realistic. A colleague of mine, Ben, and he was sat down here, when we used to do some presentations a couple of years ago, hi Ben, how many BIM technologies did we identify in the UK? And that was 3 years ago. So the chances that we can do that, virtually nil. But it's a potential solution, so let's put it up there. That's a single platform, or closed BIM, if you want the technical term. Next. There's another way of doing it. Next. And that is, next, everybody, yes, next please, everybody uses their own language that has a common interpreter. And that's a good idea, isn't it? This is exactly the way that the United Nations works, because if I'm addressing the UN, I would stand up and I would speak in my native language. There would be a group of translators somewhere up in the gods who would translate my spoken word into all of the languages in the room, and so the Chinese delegate sat at the back would hear in Chinese what I'm saying in English. Now, that would work. That is how it works. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do that in technology? So now we haven't got to worry about the technologies. We can actually use the technology which is best suited to our application, the one that we want to use, because we've got this common language. That's what I used next to explain. Next, what IFC is. That's all it is. It's a way, in technology terms, of exchanging data between multiple platforms so that this data can be shared. So, I mean, why will it work? The very simple reason why. Every other industry in the world has done it. And we have examples all around us. I'm not going to say who's got a mobile phone, because everybody in this room will have a mobile phone. Who's got 2? Who's got 3? Good, we've got no shadows in the room. I've got a grandson, he's got 2. He's 10. I say, what the hell do you want me to phone? He said, oh, wants to phone me mates and wants to phone me mum and dad. Anyway, that's by the by. Did anybody have a mobile phone in 1990? Yeah, 1 or 2, good. I bet you had muscles like a gorilla, didn't you? Because if you remember, the phones were about this big, the battery packs were about this big, and the batteries lasted for, 2 minutes? But that wasn't the problem. The problem was, because I had a mobile phone, and I think I was on Vodafone, I can't remember, and if I wanted to speak to somebody else on Vodafone, and the conversation was less than 2 minutes, then it worked quite well. If I wanted to speak to somebody on a different network, then it didn't work very well at all. And it was incredibly expensive. And that continued for a number of years until both over the pond and in Europe, somebody had this bright idea that the legislators said, if you want a network which operates a mobile phone, you have to have a common communication protocol. And that was the mid-1990s. And they were given 6 months to do it before the licenses were issued. And lo and behold, would you believe that all of them now could have a common protocol, so I could pick up the mobile phone, I could speak to anybody who got a mobile phone, irrespective of the network. Then the manufacturers of the phones, thought, this is a good idea, we're going to sell more of these. So they poured billions of dollars into the development of the hardware and the software that sits back behind this. And by 2005, I think it was, this became the #1 communication medium in the world. Now, my argument is very, very simple. That would never have happened if we didn't have a common communication protocol. It really is simple. When you think about it, it's not that difficult. So IFC is the protocol. I'm going to try this again now. Next. See, coffee break. Next, please. See if that works. Fantastic. So far we've identified that. Next. A process, if we can do it, which is based upon trust and collaboration. Next. And a means of open communication. Together, next, will provide an environment where we can create quality information. This is what we need to, this is how we need to think. So next, please. But we have to have the technologies to help us to do that, because today we can't manage this data without the technologies. But we need technologies that, next, can support the business process. Note, business process. It's important that we consider that this is first and foremost a business process. So a technology that can support the business process. And next, communicate using open protocols, as we've discussed, and next, be able to validate that the data expected is present in the model. So now we're getting into the quality area. So if we can create this, let's start and look at some elements of quality. Next, and assure that the data is correct. And I'll explain what I mean by this. Next, please. Because validation and checking are the essential elements of quality assurance, but they are slightly different. Next, validation, by definition, is a process that ensures that data is present. So if you have a means to check that, you are validating. However, checking and quality assurance, next, is a process that ensures that the data that is there is the correct data. And they are two very different things. Let me give just a quick example by looking at some sheets. Next. So I'm going to take Kobe Production as an example. Next. Validation. What we're saying in the Kobe spreadsheet is, does the data exist? Next. So here's the beloved Kobe spreadsheet. You know, it's 4 years we've been doing this, Dave. That's it. And it still hasn't changed, has it, much? That's it. It's still the same salmon colour. That's it. Who invented salmon? Sorry. Next. So does the data exist? So what we're trying to validate is the data present in that particular field? And next, is the data on time or early or late? That's what we mean by validation. However, there's one further stage, and that is next. Next, checking. And checking is asking the basic question, is the data correct? Which is very different to is the data present. So next. So here's an example. This is actually from our software, but it doesn't really matter. What we're saying here is what we've identified is that we've got certain components that don't have a Kobe type name. So if we try to map that data, it doesn't exist. So the difference between validation and checking. It's very, very simple. So just to summarize, you'll be pleased to hear that you can have a coffee. I'm running slightly, but I think you'll understand why. Next. So in summary, next, BIM is a process which is based essentially on collaboration and trust. Let's not forget that. Without that, the technology is pointless because you cannot collaborate by yourself. So we have to have the process first. Next. This process provides an environment to create and share data. In this case, via the model. That's what our process is. Next. And compared to traditional methods, far more data can never now be created. If you think about it, in the BIM world, we're creating huge amounts of data compared to traditional methods. Absolutely vast, immeasurable amounts of data, more than we used to. Next. Right. Now, this has really gone wild now because there's supposed to be something else came up there on the screen, but it looks like the resolution of the screen has squashed everything, so never mind. But what those symbols are saying is basically there is a warning. Next. If the data isn't correct, this data that we're creating, then we are potentially creating more problems than we're solving. Think about it logically. We've got this much data. If it's not the right data, we've got a big problem. Stick with the drawing board, I would say. Because if we have that, next. Next. Thank you. BIM cannot deliver on its promise. So if we don't do this, it's as simple as that. Next. Really is that simple. Next. You'll be pleased to hear, folks, that's the end. We managed to get there. Thank you for your forbearance. Yeah, we're supporting level 2, so I'll let the maestro now explain level 2. Best of luck with this screen. I'm really going to enjoy this. I'm going to sit down there and smile, the same as you've been doing at me. Just the last word is that, yeah, we are Solibri. We are up in the exhibition area. If you want to see a little bit more about what we mean with quality and validation, please pop and see us. We're very pleased to have time with you. Thank you for your time and forbearance.
Actually was turning into a bit of a farce, so I actually thought what a great demonstration of self-awareness that you chose you had a choice there, getting really angry and giving up, or going for it, and you chose to go for it. Yeah, you wait. So anyway, so one of the things I think is that absolutely that underlies that this is about trust. And one of the things I think I'd like to say is, are the relationships behind that process big enough to get the job done? So it is about data, how we are actually able to build that trust which supports collaborative relationships. And some of what Dave was actually presenting there and demonstrating in his behaviours is actually what we need to bring into the workplace more and more. But what I'm going to do now is I'm not going to ask Dave to go through that same test. What we'd like to do now is to invite you to have an early coffee, and then we're going to try and sort the technical issues here before you actually have to sit through another entertaining presentation as David did. But David, really well done. That was fantastic. Coming up is David Philp, who is head of BIM for the UK BIM Taskgroup. Great personality, of course. Rattles through his slides, so if anyone's going to test the system, it will truly be David. So welcome, David, and the best of luck.
Fingers crossed. I'm just going to show something before we start. We're going to do a bit of a test for David. Didn't work. Oh, there we go. Whoa! For me, it's fantastic to be here, and I think, especially in the circumstances, David and I have spoken together probably many times. I think it is genuinely the first time that actually I've followed you, so thank you. So what's today about? Well, first of all, it really is a true honour to be here, to actually follow both Patrick and David. There were two great messages, and despite the word next being repeated, the message still got through. I think we're on a real journey, and what's today about for me? Well, it's that opportunity to share in terms of the UK BIM Taskgroup, both in terms of looking back at the context of actually why was this important to UK government, UK industry, where have we got to in these last 4 years, and what does the future start to look like as well? So quite a few slides to get through, but I think it's quite important to actually try and get them round. That's me. You can tell by my Chelsea accent. I've been part of this sort of UK set sort of thing. But and Patrick said this, it's one of the things, this thing called BIM, it's not just UK-centric in terms of what we're doing. We are seeing BIM, and it's all different guises round about the world. Starting to think about changing how we procure assets, how we deliver them. So we're starting to see lots of new delivery models coming up as well. And we're starting to see many different governments following in terms of task groups, such as the UK, France, Germany going down that route, or indeed private clients now starting to put their own mandates down. So my general hypothesis for today in terms of BIM, it's not a matter of if you'll do BIM, but actually are you going fast enough in your journey to start to use and unlock the power of your project data. This is, for me, I really like this article. It was on it. It was in a Construction Manager magazine. And it was a nice sort of array. Looking at, BIM around the world. Saying actually, we're all at different journeys. And we all refer to this thing in different ways. And I think there's one you'll see there in terms of Singapore that uses this term hyper-modernization. And I think now when we think about BIM, it's kind of moved out in terms of, how we all initially thought about it. But it's becoming very much, if you like, starting to think about industry reform and starting to think about very much about modernization of how we do things. But it's fair to say, I think anywhere we go in the grow, I'm sure Patrick's the same, everybody's somehow on this BIM journey now, a journey to actually reform what we're doing. And I thought this was a great article. It was in, I can't pronounce it, my Scottish accent, but if you like, it's Italian FT. And again, it was looking at BIM around the world, saying that, there's a potential 30% saving unlocked. And it reflected the words that Patrick said. It was very kind words about UK government, but actually saying there was a few key components with a very clear vision in terms of target, with a working group, and that working group in terms of UK BIM Taskgroup is made up of private sector, public sector, academia, and industry, all together with goals. But the key thing for us has been putting the processes, the standards, the protocols, and the guides around about this to give a wrapper and give clear guidance to industry as well. And I think the big thing is we've got a government that's actually got vision, vision for 2016 and beyond. This thing called BIM is not going to stop. It might change its name. We might get rid at some point of that horrible acronym, as Anne said as well. But we'll continue in this journey of digitization of our construction sector. And I think for me, that's what it's become about. We're starting to think more and more about virtualization of that entire asset life cycle, and it is happening all around the globe. Everything starts with a journey, and this was our journey in terms of UK BIM Taskgroup back in 2011. I kind of look back and think probably I've got a few more grey hair since then, a few more pounds maybe around the waist, and David, please do not nod at that. But what we are saying, this is very much a journey. You have a starting point, and you probably find where you are. You're probably already on it at some point, but we hear about the 2016 mandate. It's just a staging post. We continue on. We continue on in terms of delivering what we're doing. But we started our 4-year program. We thought it was quite ambitious in terms of what we do. But we wanted to create what we call level 2, if you like, to try and create a wrap around it. As we said, all our processes. We wanted to help raise industry awareness. We've got an industry in the UK we want to be particularly proud of. It equates to 7% of our economy. We've also got at least 3 million people there, so it's a huge amount of people to try and upskill into that digital economy. We also wanted to test the hypothesis as well. You've heard from David Packer, this thing called open shareable asset information. Well, if we start to trade on it, we start to transact these data sets, does it give you better value for money? Can you make better decisions, especially in cost and carbon around it? So we had to test a hypothesis. Another thing as well, in terms of ambition, it was also about global leadership. We work abroad as well in terms of the UK. We wanted to make sure we were ahead of the game, but at the same time working well with others round about the world. And it's always a case of better together, especially in the context of BIM, and wanted to create a solid platform for moving to level 3. So if you think of level 2 in its crudest terms about collaborative information exchanges, we start to think about or imagine level 3, where we're starting to talk about an integrated construction environment. And we also wanted to make sure, like any program, we leave a strong legacy, start to think about how we get industry to go and deliver this thing. So for us, an ambitious program. And well, what have we done in the last 4 years? We think we've had, if you like, that one was the moment of singularity. In level 2, we really didn't have anything. You think where we came to today, we'll come on to it in a minute, we've got a huge pipeline of projects, we've got the processes around about it. So we think we've done a heck of a lot. And we say we, that's sort of not we in terms of the task group. I think that's we in terms of the UK industry. I think we'd be particularly proud as an industry in terms of how far we've came. And I hope Construction Manager Magazine, Elena, I hope you're okay with me stealing all your images. She's giving a wave, so I'm guessing that's okay, and I'm not going to be sued tonight. But I thought this article, we talk about the industrial revolutions that we go through, and I think we can learn a lot from history. We are starting to think very much about, I think, in terms of BIM, disruptive innovation. We're starting to think about moving into this area of virtualization, digitization, not just of design. And I think that's one of the key things we should think about. We are talking about digitization of a whole process in terms of economic transfer, in use, but we're starting to think more and more about, I think, disruption by design. And we're starting to think about moving into an era where we're starting to think more and more about telemetry and sensor-rich, intelligent assets. And we're on a journey. I think we can learn lots of lessons if you look back in terms of where things were. You go back to that loom, that first power loom, you think actually it's always been about a journey to actually how do we make the best of these modern technologies? How do we automate things? How do we get more efficient in terms of productivity needs? And I always think if something can be automated, it will be automated. It's literally a matter of time. And I think it's also fair to say, as we've went through all these different industrial cycles, as we move arguably from, if you like, the third industrial cycle to what we're now often referring to as, Industry 4.0, I think it's fair to say that it's always been the same problems. It's been very much, we talk about this being a technological sort of change. We think about technology. It's a huge, important part of it. But if anything, this is much a behavioural change program as anything. And this is always the big issue. As an industry, we've always, in the good times, lived very much in the comfort zone. We can make our money quite relatively. And it's always been interesting. When you have a change in the economy, you have, if you like, a spike. That's generally when we come out of our comfort zone and we think about creating innovation in new ways of working. So we've got to start thinking more about not just the technology, but how we start to think all these different parts coming together, our technology, our processes, but ultimately it's about culture as well. UK, I think to say, we've had a rich history of promoting reform in the UK construction industry. We've not been without our issues when it came to procurement. Coming up to, we've got this lovely country north of the border, and I would advise you to visit it, some lovely people. But you look at our trams, you look at our Scottish Parliament, poor procurement has led to real issues in terms of project delivery. The other side of the coin, we've had projects as the London Olympics that have showed the very best in class. If you have the balanced scorecard approach, you start to think about clear outcome. And I think, if anything, BIM needs very much clear outcome and purpose to why you want to get your project data. As a task group, that's one of the key things we've been working with the government departments and Rob Manning, all been trying to make sure that departments are getting value for that data they are creating. So we can get it right. But history shows us, if we go back to 1944, anybody 1944, pre-1944? David, you put your hand up there? No, sorry, just asking. Sorry, next. Sorry. I'm actually quite enjoying this now. This is good. But, we think back, it's almost a half a century ago. In fact, it's over. We start to think about reform in terms of procurement. You look back at the Simons report, look at the things, actually move away from first past the post. We start to think about better upskilling, training, and we talk about the word more collaborative approach. We're still talking about the same things today. Collaboration between all these different players in the supply chain, and start to think more and more about design and construction and earlier contractor involvement. You think, well, we're still talking about them now. Why have we not delivered all these things that history has learned us? We move forward then, another 50 years. We have probably that everybody's heard of, that certainly went to the UK, constructing the team, also known as the Latham Report. And again, we can start to see some of the things that starts to postulate. Government as a client actually has to take a leadership role in terms of what it's doing. The importance of the client and actually getting the right project procurement, the right project delivery. Starting to think about actually better briefing. And that's a theme that I think will come through today, especially in terms of the digital plan of work in the UK and how that will help to create, if you like, better information requirements from the client. And coordination. Start to think about coordinated information, a big part of the BIM agenda. And I think that we'll start to see as well, we start to think about a more, if you like, caring way of working, more altruistic in terms of starting to share. And we think about more modern methods of procurement as well. Again, we move forward just a couple of years. We had Sir John Egan, I'm sure you all remember, came in from the automotive industry. And again, John promoted, it was very much about lean working. And I still think that's the thing. I don't think we should think about BIM in isolation. It is about BIM, lean ways of working. And that's a key thing that John looked at. How do we start to eliminate the waste? And it's about committed leadership. But we start to think more and more, actually, what do our clients want? What information will we give them? How do we start to move from integrated processes of working and start to think more and more about a commitment? But it's also about that agenda for partnering as well. So these are key things that we've reflected as we went on. Now, I must admit, out of all these, this is one of my personal favourites. How many folk have read Rethinking Construction? Never Waste a Good Crisis? 1, 2, 3, 4. Not many. For me, it was a report. It came out through Construction Excellence. The chap at the top is the chief executive up at Crossrail, Andrew Wilsonholme. And Andrew's hypothesis was very much actually, as we move into any sort of downward cycle, actually we become more innovative, and we should not waste that. And Andrew also, I said to him, did we actually learn from it? And Andrew said, actually, the new generation actually start to understand the technologies, but actually they're more T-shaped. Well, what does that mean? They're not just domain-specific. They're not just an architect or a quantity surveyor. They're thinking more and more about that entire project life cycle. But he also had a concern as well. As we move into this world of digitization, do we end up with a period of, we've got 2 tiers? Not doing BIM, but those can actually get new value and those that can't. And trying to unpack it, the different groupings you can have, that you get those that actually simply don't get it. What's this whole digitization agenda about? And actually, we've still got a huge community of people that heads are stuck in the sand saying, actually, I'm quite happy to make, my low margin, high risk energy, and actually, we're not too bored about the clients. At the same time, I think it's fair to say there's still a lot of people confused. Any change, leads to some degree of confusion. And as a task group, that's been a key thing for us, forming what we call our BIM for groups, BIM for SME, all working, trying to raise awareness of a better world. At the same time, a long tail, 3 million people to try and pull up, not just the big contractors, but the small SMEs. It's really appropriate we get them going as well, because they make up such a big part of our supply chain. But at the same time, we've got those that do get it. I'm not talking about doing BIM or putting some software in, but very much those that can add value, they can reduce risk, and we're starting to see them already getting competitive advantage. So it's key that people can all start in terms of this journey. Hopefully everybody has read this one, 2011 Government Construction Strategy. Everybody hands up, come on, hands up, more. Anybody from the press, that was 100% Elaine, just for record purposes there, said Philp. But, this whole government construction strategy, it wasn't about BIM. It goes back to all these key points that we saw in these earlier reports. Again, we're learning from history. It was about the lean client, the client that's got leadership. It was about starting to think about new forms of procurement. And the big part, probably the most important part along with BIM, was government soft landing. Start to think more how we join capital expenditure and operational expenditure together. That is our golden thread. I think sometimes we get too much lost in our world of BIM and forget there's other parts of this journey as well. I'm not going to unpack this just now, but that's the timeline we've got. We went through a series of what we call horizon lines, if you like, since starting the group up in 2011. We went through, and I think, people starting their journey can learn from this. So we went through enabling, testing, hypothesis. We're trying to build capacity and capability within the government departments, which Anne and that's been supporting. And we're now starting to think about embedding it and moving on to that whole world of delivery. Now, Taskgroup's been quite important, if you like. I think trying to keep the whole thing moving forward, keeping it up, and actually showing that compelling vision of what good looks like. And again, moving on past 2011, we've got 2025, the industrial strategy for construction. Well, where have we got? You can start to see that one. It's always ironic, that actually this is savings, but it points down. I think, subconsciously it always looks bad. But you can see there's between 12 and 20% savings now being regularly cemented through the government construction strategy and this digitisation and soft landings. In terms of pipeline, there is now over 10 billion in the public sector in the UK, excluding High Speed 2, Thames Timeway. So I'm sure if you add them up, there'll be at least 50 billion in projects looking at level 2 maturity going through. So from the supply chain, there's a compelling vision to do it now. You've got a key client that's saying, actually, we need project data to make well-informed decisions and actually better manage our assets as we move into operation. We've also got the industrial strategy. The key ambition within the government construction strategy was saving at 20%, but very much looking at CapEx and carbon. We're now starting to think the longer term. So we're starting to think 33%, but that's very much whole life cost. That means a different thinking. So we've got to think more and more about clients that are going to start to buy life cycle. The carbon agenda, I think that's such a big challenge. I think it's one we often forget about. We've got to start thinking more and more, how do we use our technologies to make low carbon solutions? We're thinking about faster delivery. How do you make faster delivery at 50%? Okay, we've got design for manufacture and assembly. That's a key component now, working alongside BIM. But it's also starting to think about automation. We can start to imagine automation of maybe some of our regulatory processes. And we could even start to imagine some self-procurement in terms of what that looks like, coupled together with smarter, more efficient workflows. And then we want to start to export this as well. And we're working with groups such as the Manufacturers Strategic BIM Forum to make that happen. So how are we getting on? Well, you can start to see there, there's been some great savings. You can see there, we saved 840 million last year. That's a huge saving. And that's really good for the economy because that means we can spend more money in roads and schools in terms of what we're doing. So we think about the value of the economy. It's a huge part of what we're doing. I think it's fair to say that, people are doing BIM in various guises. And it's coming a bit metaphor for, I think, industry change. And I think that's a good thing. And I think it's really good. Start to imagine what a digitised sector looks like, how we can start to use our information better to make computer-readable data. We do it in every other aspect of our life. Why not in that world of construction? Now, for me, if there's one reason we do this, this should be it. I think it's about rebranding construction. I think we had a particular poor sort of image of construction. Bob the Builder, male-dominated. That's so wrong. I've got a 9-year-old daughter. I want to make a smart choice about coming into construction. We've had groups such as BIM 2050. In fact, we had a meeting last night with CIC refreshing the group. People starting to think about what does an industry look like that's innovative, technologically advanced, and diverse, especially in terms of jobs. And I think that's what BIM's starting to see. We can reimagine, if you like, data scientists, people looking at deep analytics coming into construction. They get this stuff. They collaborate, yet they come into a somewhat toxic industry at times where we don't think about how we can create that T-shape for them. So why do it? Well, do it for the next generation. I think it's about leaving that lasting legacy in terms of what we're doing. I like to think we've had some degree of, good leadership. Politicians have got really, got real vision in terms of this, and we should be making proud of where we've got. Be at the vanguard towards that digital construction. And we've won a few trophies along the road, I think, which is nice. It's nice for industry to actually see, we're being recognised for what we're doing. That was the FIATEC Award almost a year ago over in Texas that we picked up. Government and industry working well together, which is really important. And I have a picture of a young Patrick there. saying some kind words, Patrick. And I think they were really important. And down there, the right, also there's Phil Bernstein. And again, but I think some of the key words that came out that we've heard, it's been about leadership, it's been about innovation, it's been about efficiency. But I think also the word rapid has came out a few times where we've heard some things. Would we have got there with level 2 of that mandate? I think we would, but not at the speed we have. It's certain to, I think, created more of a speed in terms of where we're moving in terms of the UK. We also heard Patrick talking about working well together. We're formed now the BIM for EU working group, along with other member states. You can see there, that was our last meeting. I think we had about 15 of the 28 member states there. Starting to think about how we work well together, starting to share technical best practice, how we can start to think more and more about client leadership. And again, I think that's been the key thing. We're speaking so much to our colleagues now, especially in continental Europe, about how we can do this better together. Patrick said, the last thing we want to create is this UK standard that's locked down to what we're doing. We want this to work well, and that's why we back and we think it's worth fighting for is open, shareable data standards. It's just so important in terms of the journey. We've also been trying to raise, capacity and awareness in the supply chain. Okay, you can take these with a pinch of salt, but I think it's a good barometer. And there we are in terms of the UK. Currently, it's showing quite ambitious, especially to our poorer relations in the US, Patrick. But you can go back there and do that, but start shouting and saying we're going to do it. But take these with a pinch of salt. But I genuinely believe that we're really on a march in the UK. I think it's a bit easier as well. We're a bit more cohesive in terms of we've got, if you like, a centralised government approach. And I think this was the big part for me that actually said, in the same report, actually, we've had a mandate and it's actually helped. 76% says inspired them to initiate a specific BIM project. And we're not talking about an organisational change, but maybe their first baby steps into the world of BIM. And 66% encouraged to add BIM resources to their organisation. Well, that's really important. We've got clients such as High Speed 2, which I think will be the flagship clients that are looking at digitisation. Level 2 is a minimum standard. They want confidence that they can help upskill. They've lit a package to do that. And I think it would be great. They've got a package helping people pull up the supply chain. And what the report suggested that was 56% had at least of those interviewed had a project or had processes that were within that level 2 arena now. So we're starting to see us moving up the ramp. Can we do it fast enough? Well, I think we have to keep certainly progressing in terms of that journey. But people are starting to think more about making financial provision and having a BIM strategy. Standards, I think, really, really important. I'm not going to end Nick Tune's going to, if the button works for you, Nick, I'm sure you can have a bit of a, I've got this if I don't take the batteries out. But actually, to me, this is the important part. This is the role of the client. Okay, don't try and sort of, but this is one of the slides, the very first slide I put together, actually. This is about clients becoming really good at articulating desired BIM outcomes. Actually, what information do I want? Where does it give you value? So we've got free constructs now in the UK, OIRs, AIRs, and EIRs. I know this is a bad nursery rhyme, but about client defining organisation requirements, asset requirements, and the employer information for these early decision-making process. We're trying to defining level 2 as we come through this as well. So level 2 was important for us. We could build standards around about it, but also in terms of commercial model, it's still about collaborative working. We have to go through up the steps. Number 1, level 1, get a common data environment there, design management, and then we move to level 2, sharing information management, really critical, but still working with domains. But you can see there, some of the key things is about defined information, validated information, and data transactions, and we can reuse that data in many ways. Key constructs of level 2 is a minimum standard. And well, why is that important? It lets the clients buy data once. We get data growth as opposed to the traditional sawtooth, and we can make earlier, more informed, and indeed collaborative decisions in terms of what we're doing as a client. That's the big thing, buying data once as opposed to maybe 4 or 5 times. And please, we hear people talk about doing level 2 or level 3. Just get level 1 right first. Make sure you're doing this part, this common data environment. It's just so important. So is good design management. The principles of all these things that we've done before, good procurement, good design management, they are still very much the foundation of this journey as well. I don't know how well you can see these at the back, but my colleague from the Taskgroup, Rob Manning, and some of the core team put these together. I think it reflects quite well in terms of level 2. And I will, okay, how are we doing time-wise then? Yeah, another half hour? Yeah. I'm not saying next, I think I've got a bit more time. But actually, it starts with the outer layer, what we call in the UK, PAS 1192 Part 5. And give it its shortened name. We're thinking about mindful security in terms of BIM. That's a key wrapper for us. Start to think more mindful about how we share information. We've then got coming in the way, we've got BS 8536, where you already had me mention, if you like, government soft landings. This is the early stages of starting to put that into, if you like, a British standard, starting to think more and more about how do we better brief for our assets as we go through from a facilities management point of view. We then, if you like, we start to look at the use cases. You can start to see coming there the value that it's starting to bring round about. We can query data sets. We can start to think about some degree of digital procurement. And then we come to the middle where we start to think about, if you like, we've got our tools and our processes to support it. We've got from, if you like, that the CapEx delivery side, a key document here, BS 1192 Part 2, which is looking at how we start to, if you like, share information. And coming off of that, we've got our BIM protocol in terms of wrapping it up commercially. And you hear today in terms of, for me, some of the key things. We've got our digital plan of work coming up, helping define information, helping validate. And also for us, one of the key parts, and David talked about as well, the core classification system, and Stephen Hamill will be talking about that. But that's really key important, because what does that do? Well, it helps, I think, it makes it easier for people, and it helps build capacity in the supply chain if we do that. And last but no means least, we've got COBE as an information exchange. And I think as we start to think about level 3, getting people to think about information exchanges, open data formats is so important. Actually, by government, mandating COBE, I think we've helped actually raise IFC, because lots of people are actually using IFC to get their COBE data set. So we're in these early stages of people using in the UK their open shareable asset information through the likes of COBE. The companion document, part 3, again, same things coming together, but we can start to see we're getting different value cases in terms of what we're doing. I think these are great diagrams that actually show how we're doing. But again, COBE, again, as we get through to level 3, I think even for ourselves, you start to understand the importance in terms of data validation, but actually how we can use it for so many different things. It might be putting it in a CAFM system, but there's so many use cases and so many ways of achieving it that are so important. I'm not going to labour this, but we think about BIM, and we often still think of it very much, unfortunately, in the world of design. And what the digital plan of work seeks to do, we can start to think about coming in as a client persona at early stages and start to define information requirements and responsibilities. We can then start to think about, as we moving through to next stages, we're starting to think about describing, I think for the first time, geometrically and indeed non-graphically, in terms of level of definition, what the level of detail is, our 3D, and our level of information, our non-graphical information, to suit a particular stage and a plan of work. So we can customize it to suit plain language questions, and we're starting to think about it at this point getting to object level. So Stephen's going to be talking about that a bit later on, but I think it's going to be really key. It's going to be a free tool. It's been funded by Innovate UK, and it's getting ready for, if you like, our soft launch at, Stephen will tell me, but on the 8th of April, later next month. But essentially, what we're talking about in terms of these processes is clients becoming good at buying and using digital data. Number one, if you're a client, you're looking to get capability to deliver. Can the supply chain, and indeed their supply chain, actually be able to deliver this? When do I actually need my information requirements in terms of a plan of work? How does this fit commercially? What I'm going to use the data for as a client? What's the use case? Is it for FM? What's the use? You might not be buying all the IP, or if it's a library, you might be doing it. And how you want, what's your agreed model output? What's the level of definition? What's the format going to be? And the process. Trying to get everybody working to the same process, really, really key. And agreed to the data exchange format such as COBE. So we're starting to bring this together under this level 2 wrapper. This is a slide from the Ministry of Justice, and I think this is so important that we cannot think about BIM in isolation. If you want to make BIM work, don't just go and buy some technology. Think about your processes, other parts are working. You can see, I love the fact that the key thing that holds together the bag tag is the soft landings. But you see the MOJ, it's about working BIM with our BIM library as well as our program. They're measuring it. They've got KPIs, they've got a datum to be able to measure performance. So it's not about BIM in isolation. It should be part of that wider agenda of what we're doing. It's not working. Oh, we're joking. Okay, some use cases. We've got there, this is Cookham Wood, the first trial project. It's cemented 20% savings, but actually you can see some of the use cases down there. But actually it was about innovation, it was about collaboration, and the early trial goes actually exchanging information. It wasn't the full BIFTA. We're working on that just now. We're trying to get all the information out, but we're working on all these data exchanges. So as we start to think about the future now, the big ambition of level 2 was to, create the solid foundation for this thing called level 3, what we are now calling Digital Built Britain. So let's go back to all these reports. Actually, what we've been trying to do with level 2 is do what we should have been doing, but in a digitized manner. For me, level 3 Digital Built Britain will be the paradigm shift. So you can see some of the things that we've actually created there. We've got the tools, we've tested hypothesis, and we're starting to think about legacy now for the delivery. When we say legacy, it's about now delivering level 2. And that's, again, our slide way back, 2010. We said this whole thing today should pretty much be a launch pad for level 3. So actually, I think we've done pretty good at that. I think we've got a strong foundation. We're still growing. I mean, level 2 is going to be about for many years. We're still refining it, optimizing it. But we're starting to imagine, I think, the whole reimagining of all new roles within construction industry. We're starting to think about the digital client, being able to define, if you like, your computational requirements. Designers are thinking more and more about outcome-based as opposed to output. The digital contractor thinking more and more about how they integrate the supply chain that's maybe more agile in terms of data flows. And the FM contractor is thinking more and more, how can they use these data to get more real-time post-occupancy evaluation? But I think on the right-hand side, we're also starting to see clients now that are starting to think about the whole, how do we start to simulate that whole business model simulation? And I think that's a really important next stage in our journey plan as well. I'm sure everybody knows the chap on the right, Right Honourable Vince Cable, our Secretary of State, who launched a couple of weeks back the whole trajectory and the business plan for Digital Built Britain Level 3. And I think that's really key to say. It is a vision. It is a business plan that we put together. And well, why do it? You think here we are today. We're almost 4 and a bit years creating Level 2. In June this year, we'll have finished all the components. I was thinking it's almost 5 years to get Level 2, to get where we should be. It will take 8 to 10 years to get where we need to be for Level 3. So it's important that we can set the vision. We can start to think about the mobilization of that just now, whilst at the same time making sure that we're delivering Level 2. And Level 3 builds upon Level 2. And there's a website there if you want to go and see the business plan, digitalbuiltbritain.com. But you can see there we're starting to think more and more about the Internet of Things, and Tim Broyd's going to be speaking about this later this afternoon. But you can start to see the big thing is we're starting to now think more and more about performance-based, if you like, data sets that we can transact upon. And that opens up new contractual models that are thinking more and more. I fly down to this wonderful city most Monday mornings. Probably the engine, is based upon a power by the hour, a unitary charge. So we're starting to think more and more about the whole economic piece around about BIM as well. But Level 3, Digital Built Britain, it's starting to think more about the word integration of telemetry, and start to think more and more about enabling total costs, and more about, if you like, operational carbon as well. And a big part of that, we've started with the Manufacturer Strategic BIM Forum, is starting to look at telemetry. How do we start to put these things into our components to get real-time feedback in terms of what we're doing? And I think this is quite key on the right-hand side. You can see there that, the trajectories for Digital Built Britain Level 3 actually start off with 3A. How do we actually better enable Level 2? How do we optimize what we've got already? We move to 3B, enabling new technologies and systems such as telemetry. And then we start to think about the new business models that opens up. And the economic side of this for Level 3, I think, is massive. And then we've got to capitalise and keep growing as well. But please, if I get one message, we're planning for Level 3. It's happening in the background, but do Level 2 just now. We're creating a legacy as well, for this in terms of the digital transformation. We want to make sure this lasts and sustains. It's not the word legacy. And again, that's what we said. And back, going back the 4 years, we were trying to get the stabilizers off. This is still early stages in terms of the journey plan. But we often get asked, and I think it's a nice way to sign things off in terms of actually, what does your BIM journey look like? It can be simplified down. I generally think David talked about that simplification as well. Number one is know where you want to go. Your journey might still be actually to achieve Level 1 first. And then it might be going from Level 1 to Level 2. It might be organizational. It might be a trial project. But know clearly where you want to go. And then measure, where actually are you now? You're probably, no matter what you're doing, you're probably on that journey and footprint. You've got some degree of capability, capacity, and probably some technology footprint as well. So know where you want to go. And you start to think about how you're going to get there. How do you start to close that gap? Put your strategy together and think very much about the processes. Don't always get BIM people in. Get real people in that, start to think about how do you optimize maybe an architectural workflow or a commercial, and build the technology set around about there. And I think the fourth point is simple as just bloody do it. I mean, it's got to be. We talk about this all the time, which is actually, I think, a relatively easy process. Let's just do it. and then we can sort of kick it about and refine it. But we've got to get into that refinement loop, so please just do it. And please visit the Taskgroup website. And I want to do this one more time. Next. Just a call from our friends over in Ireland at CETA as well. We would love to support them as well. They've got the BIM Gathering this year and a call for papers. Alan Hoare's across today, so you can maybe catch up with Alan, but it'll be on the website. So, and thank you. Thank you for listening to our story.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Are there any questions for David before he leaves, actually? You can grab a... No, okay, if you do your transfer, and David, you can go to the lectern anyway. Any questions for David?
Look, Robert, I don't think I need it, but Robert, it's a really good question. Apparently it's voice activated, and it only works with Scottish accents. So. That and I took the batteries out when David was going on first.
Okay. Moving on to if gentlemen, you could stop the banter now, please. Thank you.
I think there's a question.
Any serious questions there? Yeah, there's one at the back there. Yes. In fact, it's Stephen, I think, isn't it?
I just saw that you mentioned that how many millions you can save by using BIM, and I was just wondering how do you assess how much you can actually save?
It's a really good question. And the first thing I would say is we probably didn't save it by using BIM. We used it as bringing different things together from our strategy, so it would be BIM plus. BIM plus perhaps a new form of procurement we try, BIM plus soft landings. But the way we measured it, and I think it's a really good question, the first thing we done was we actually had, a benchmarking group. We benchmarked what the starting point was. We then created what we called a trial project delivery group. So when a project started, we made sure we knew where the data was to start, and then we measured it through with partners from industry and academia. So we had a group that actually worked on it, and all the case studies are on the Cabinet Office website. But it's really key, as you rightly say, that, and we want to get a bit more out to actually unpack how that saving actually unlocks. So it was BIM plus, if you like, but smarter ways of procurement. And probably one of the big parts was probably less risk coming back. We're getting better prices back from the marketplace as well.
Okay, thank you, David, very much. If I can then introduce Ben Wallbank of Philp Projects, who is going to take us on a little bit of an exploration of what Philp Projects is doing within this context now. So,
I'm going to
Ben,
try.
Okay.
Let's see if this works. Yes, good luck indeed. Amazing. So this is me. I am yet another architect gone BIM crazy back in the 90s. What am I going to talk about today? I'm going to tell you a little bit about Viewpoint. We are members of BuildingSmart and very keen supporters of this event. I'm going to give you a few little reminders, not actually that after the last two you particularly need them. And then I'm going to talk about how Viewpoint can help you on that BIM journey, particularly about level 2, but then also looking beyond level 2 to what's coming next, the Digital Built Britain stuff. So we're a global company. Philp Projects have been around for 15 years, head office in Newcastle, and we're now part of an American company based out in Portland, and this has greatly increased our scope to develop. So in the last year, we've grown from about 40 in Newcastle to about 100. So we're developing fast, and it's given us great scope to pursue our dreams in terms of digital information. So we work in all the fields of construction. We've got huge numbers of users and over £1 trillion worth of construction value. And these are some of our customers. And you'll note that we are sort of cradle to grave guys. So we deal with data right from the inception of a project all the way through to the asset's demolition. And that's really, so as for projects, you'll kind of probably have thought of us about data management within the construction period. But we're now moving both ways as well. So the reminders. If you're doing a bit of 3D modeling as a contractor or a consultant, you probably are thinking that you have the BIM T-shirt. But the BIM T-shirt should read It's all about the information. Of course, the 3D model is vitally important. It is a route map to that information. Every time that one of the team drops an object into their BIM model, it is given something called a GUID, a globally unique identifying number, kind of hidden away within one of the dialog boxes, you'll find it. And that number allows you to hang information off it. So that might be for a light. That dropped into my model, that light fixture would have a GUID. And I would be able to attach to that, I don't know, information on the design output of the light bulb, the actual output of the light bulb, who the manufacturer was, when it was installed, what the embedded carbon is in its manufacture, what the embedded carbon is in its transport to site, all kinds of things. How many people does it take to change the light bulb? How many spares have I got? And of course, that light fitting, identical to that light fitting at the back where it's lower, may have a different number of people to change the light bulb, a different job involved. So all kinds of information that we can hang off our BIM models. So there is a huge amount during the construction process that we can do. We get better information, better coordinated sets of information. We can clash detect. We can put 4D time, 5D costs we can start to take from a model. Huge amount that we can do. But as the life of the asset goes on, we can expect the data side of things to become more and more important. So here, obviously, are our CIC work stages running through the job. And as a reminder, the key drive of the government's Level 2 initiative is actually the COBE bit. If we look at the AEC building cycle, as we've got here, you'll note that in the overall costs, only 3% of an asset's cost is its design, 17% its construction, and 80% lies beyond when the construction team have finished, during the building's life. And that's why the COBE side of things, that asset data, is so vitally important to allow us to dig into this area of the cost. So I'm going to now take another look at Level 2, a little reminder of what the key objectives are, the key elements are, and talk about how we could help you with that journey. So we are phenomenally lucky. You know, back in 2010, in November 2010, when I first heard Paul Morell stand up and talk about the objectives at a conference in the Barbican, a BISREA conference in the Barbican, talk about the objectives of the construction strategy and all of this information that they were going to produce to help us with this journey, I just thought, hang on a second, this is government, they're never going to do it. We are phenomenally lucky. We have actually got a great set of integrated information which together define what Level 2 is. Don't let anybody tell you that Level 2 isn't properly defined, because if you look at all the documentation that goes alongside it, it absolutely does. So, the Construction Industry Council, CPICS, British Standards, and BuildingSmart were hugely involved in putting together these standards. So, Construction Industry Council dealt with the commercial elements and legal elements of it. We've got BuildingSmart, not surprisingly, dealing with, first of all, COBE, but as time goes on, IFC as well, how everything communicates with each other. We had CPICS, who started off classification, and the British Standards Institute, surprise, surprise, did the standards. So here are those key pillars together. The 5 parts. Oh, that says 4. The 5 parts of BS 1192. So part 1, communication within the team of non-BIM information. Part 2, the CapEx process, construction process. It's how we deal with the process of BIM during the construction. Part 3, OPEX. Part 4, COBE. Part 5, cybersecurity. Then we've got the bit that everybody forgets, which is really important. So I was talking yesterday about this. The CIC protocol document, which allows us to use standard contracts. So we should all be having some of this. Soft landings and the digital plan of work, dealing with level of detail, both in terms of geometry and information at each work stage, and classification. Uniclass 3, possibly. And these bits are missing, so you'll see the signs change. So we've got a bit more IFC coming in as we get the digital plan of work. And, of course, MBS are dealing with, you'll hear later, I'm sure, about in much more detail about new classification. So a reminder, what are the deliverables of level 2? So you've got various BIM originating softwares which together work and produce their models, which are then federated, checked and then federated. And from that, the deliverable, at least for the time being, is still that same old deliverable, 2D contract drawings in the form of PDFs. Wow. And COBE, the asset data, delivered in the form of a spreadsheet. And then we're supposed to hand over native software files as well at the moment. And all of that sits within a common data environment. That's what we do. So let's look at that. So you've still got a whole load of documentation to deal with. So we do this well. This is what probably you know us for. Document management, EDMS, the electronic document management. It's still what most of you require, even on non-BIM projects. And it's what we're best known for. Now, that's also a disadvantage, because you guys probably just think of us for that still. It's what you're familiar with, and it will decline in importance over the next few years massively. But don't think of us as old school. We are new school. So, if we look at the good old BS 1192, PAS Part 2, it's a process. It's actually process mapping, a really, really well thought out one. So we start off by asking our asset owners what they know about what we've already got. We use the information that comes from that to define what we're asking for in the form of an employer's information requirement. Industry then respond with some pre-contract BEPs, BIM execution plans. That's how are we going to provide what we've been asked for. Once the contract's awarded, they produce a program when we're going to deliver that work. The project starts, and we've got a whole bunch, CIC aligned, work stage aligned, or new RIBA work stage aligned, information exchanges, and employers' decision points. So these are the COBE decision points. The design, the construction period, information grows, handover, and operation, when we get all that good benefit of what we've produced in terms of data. So first thing is we can help you in the planning coordination. We can work with an asset owner from the very inception in developing and recording their process from the first time before a job's even really is a job, as they go round from site to site, analysing those sites, perhaps taking a picture of the site. All of that information can be recorded within the common data environment, so you have an audit trail of the entirety of this. We can help with the procurement, setting out the procurement. And of course, so here is process mapping for the actual client. So here's the MOJ one down at the bottom. So as you process map what your key decision points are as a business, using our workflow designer, you can put each of those processes down and note what decisions are to be made and by whom, and all of those decisions are noted and recorded. So the federated model bit, well, we can do that too. So we've got something called 4BIM. You'll see, incidentally, we've got another little slot tomorrow, and John will show you a lot more about this kind of thing tomorrow as well. So we can federate in the form of an IFC delivery. It's web-based. That means that anybody can participate from their own office, viewing over the internet. They can view, control the model, interrogate it, and discuss it online, or obviously around the table if they want to. You can mark the model up, you can do clash resolution, and of course you can create and assign tasks of that. And there's version control as well as new IFCs are added. Ooh. And it looks a bit like that. So again, as I say, you'll see some more of that tomorrow. But the COBie bit, obviously vitally important. Yep, we can help with that too. So within, we can help the client define what is required in terms of COBie, because it's not the same from job to job. We can validate the COBie, and we can report in the form of RAG reporting the COBie. And of course, record what's being done. But importantly, if you select any line within your COBie spreadsheet, or select any object, they're linked. You can see what's what. We're also getting into mobile. We've recently bought something called Priority 1, which is becoming Viewpoint Field View, and over the coming months this will be integrated also, so that data from site can be integrated directly back into the data within the common data environment. So the key messages are: the common data environment, Viewpoint, will allow you to define, then to monitor, then to validate, and of course record as the single source of information for the particular asset, the information and the data on the project. But taking a quick look beyond level 2, David mentioned the Digital Built Britain announcement in February. If you look at that on page, I think it's 22, you'll notice that actually the journey to whatever level 3 will be, and nobody quite knows yet, and they're completely honest about that, the journey starts with level 3A, which is with the digital plan of work. Really, it's just level 2 using IFCs a bit more. You'll notice that there are movements, again, with level 3A to get the whole infrastructure side of the IFC completed. And, of course, it's centered around IFC data, and Viewpoint 4 project is also centered around IFC. So we're well placed for that, and we will be integrating in the coming months, once the depower is finished, the information coming from the digital plan of work into our common data environment. So level 3A, just so that we're clear, will probably look something like this. So IFC 2x3 files going actually backward, first of all, out from the depower to populate the various tools. And then once the authors have finished their work, they will be able to upload, to validate whether they've completed what they're supposed to do. And you can obviously spit out a spreadsheet, COBie spreadsheet from there. Or you can go direct with a 2x3 to your FM tool. Of course, you've still got 2D contract documents being the deliverable, but I think far more sensibly, you've got the chance, because it's a far better file format in terms of archival archive, you've got the possibility of handing over a 2x3 file. But the T-shirt also probably ought to read, big data is coming. So I think our biggest challenge as an industry, I don't think anybody's quite got the hang of this yet, except for probably most of the people in this room, actually. But most of the industry really doesn't get that not using non-proprietary shareable data structures is the key to all of this. So our biggest challenge is learning to provide that in a digital format. And COBie really is our trainer wheels for that. So why is this so important that we don't go down a proprietary route? It's actually easier probably now just for originating software A, because most of the FM software is a relational database, and it's probably easier just to map the unique, the proprietary schema for information from product A to the proprietary information in FM software Z separately. 2, okay. But if you have an asset in Land's End or an asset in John O'Groats with different teams using different softwares, you then can't do any comparison, yet alone if you've got lots. Now, of course, a large asset owner like government has lots and lots. If you use COBie, you can start to do really interesting things in terms of comparing data across your entire asset, because all of those assets are in the same format. So, we are IFC-based. We are a big data analysis tool, so we're currently beta testing with the Ministry of Justice, for whom we are their common data environment. Thank goodness. We are currently beta testing our new non-sequential database so that they can look across the assets at different COBie files from different assets and, for instance, say, well, I want to know about this type of boiler in all my assets. Where have we got it? Whatever. So we're just starting to do that. We are a cradle-to-grave common data environment. We'll work with the DPAL when it's finished. And we're just starting now to talk to other parts of industry about how we begin to get that kind of database-to-database communication. Okay, so think of us as School of the Future. I'm not even going to go through that. Thanks a lot.